The Congress shall have the power to provide for the common defense, to regulate commerce with foreign nations with which the United States is at war, or which nation is judged by a majority vote in both houses to constitute an unjustifiable danger, or something like a clear and present danger, an objective danger, or something like that. So, that's it. That's the power to regulate commerce clause in my version. Now, the power to regulate commerce clause in the original Constitution says that they shall have the power to regulate commerce. Let's go through that one more time. I think it's quite valuable. Shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations, only under the following circumstances: with which the United States is at war, or which nation is judged by a majority vote in both houses to constitute a clear and present danger, unjustifiable danger. The Congress shall have the power to establish an uniform rule of naturalization, to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for by what though? By this only, not by grants, not by establishing universities, not by student loans, only by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. That's the sole power of promoting progress in science, is by protecting intellectual property. To constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court's established by the Constitution, and then Section 8 gives Congress the power to constitute tribunals inferior. To define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations, reserving that the law of this Constitution is sovereign in this land. Okay? So, offenses on the high seas and stuff is kind of difficult because that's not territory of the United States. But, according to the Constitution, it's territory of the federal government of the United States, the Congress. And as it says there, the law of this Constitution is sovereign in this land. To declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and to make rules concerning captures on land and water. Now that's pretty old. What they're referring to there is piracy, or privateers. These are people who would get boats, and when their country went to war with another country, the government encouraged them to go capture the merchant ships of other boats. So privateers would go around being professional pirates during wars. And I think that's what they mean by captures on land and water, but it also means prisoners of war. And that also would have to be dealt with by Congress. All that comes under that clause. To raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 3 years. So budgeting has to be 3 years maximum. Now, I might strike that, considering how long the Army has to budget sometimes. But I didn't think I thought it more appropriate that the government should have to give financial accounting on a shorter term basis to the people. Because in a voluntary tax situation, which is what this Constitution is going to set up, in a voluntary tax situation, the people need to know, there needs to be like see-throughness of the government. What's it called? Transparency of finance in the government. Okay, they shall have the power to provide and maintain a navy, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer term than 3 years, as like the common defense. To make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. To provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. So the people's militia can be used to keep order, suppress insurrections. It's like riots and stuff, you know. The Congress shall have the power to call forth the militia. They shall have the power to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. Certain of the powers will be prescribed by Congress, but Officers will be appointed by the states, and training will be carried out by the states. To make all laws which shall be necessary, the Congress shall have the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers, and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States, or in any department or officer thereof. Section 9, the limits on Congress. This is the fun part. This is sticky and fun. The migration or importation of such persons as any of the states now existing shall think proper to admit shall not be prohibited by the Congress except to require a monetary fee sufficient to cover the costs of admitting them to the country, if any. Now, originally there was a clause somewhere, something like this, that said persons can only be admitted, and they were talking about slaves, but this is not talking about slaves. The migration or importation, this is people coming in, whether you pay to ship them in because they promised to work for you, whatever the situation may be. The migration or importation of such persons as any of the states now existing shall think proper to admit. So any state wants to admit any people it wants to. It shall not be prohibited by the Congress. Congress can make no law prohibiting importation of people into any which one of the states, except, here's the one thing Congress can do, they can require a monetary fee sufficient to cover the cost of admitting them to the country, if any. Now, they used to bring them into two ports, Ellis Island and whatever in San Francisco. And if you came to the United States before a certain date, it was just get to our shores. But now there's a couple different ports they come into, and probably someplace in Texas or Southern California that's an international port. But you come in, if you're a permanent immigrant, they check you for disease and stuff, and if you're diseased, they send you back. That's the old way to do it. I don't know if they do that anymore. The cost of running those situations and the salary for the peoples who are there, sorting people and making sure that their papers are in order, and if we require any papers, although I'm not sure that we should. So just whatever the cost of admitting them to the country is, that leaves open quite a large door of what exactly is involved in admitting them to the country. It does leave open an area that would have to be hammered out by the good men elected by this Constitution, or I think could be nailed down a bit further before the Constitution were to take effect, which may never happen. The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless, when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. Now, I didn't put any vote on that, but probably there should be something like Congress shall have 10 days of suspension on a majority vote of this type or whatever, and then they have to suspend habeas corpus by a vote of 3/4 or something if they're going to hold such and such persons any longer than whatever. Some hurdle to get over, and so it's not just murky. This just says here that habeas corpus shall always be unless there's a rebellion or an invasion and their public safety requires. And that's not enough. I think that needs to be hammered down further, I'm afraid. It has to be something like 3/4 vote after a certain amount of time of holding an individual under this way. No bill of attainder or ex post facto law shall be passed. Now, ex post facto law is after the fact. So if a guy does something, it's not illegal, Congress passes an ex post facto law, after the fact law, makes it illegal and arrests him even though it wasn't illegal at the time. Where the judgment comes after the fact, where the person couldn't have known they were breaking the law. No such laws. No tax shall be laid unless in time of war, and then only on a 2/3 vote of both houses. So you have to have, that's a pretty high, and I think we might even push it up to 3/4. And then continuing, no tax shall continue except during time of war. No tax shall endure longer than 1 year without a compulsive review, at which time 2/3 vote on both houses may recontinue the tax. So that any given tax has to be during a time of declared war. It has to be a 2/3 vote every single year. As per what I was saying earlier, we might raise that to 3/4 at the danger of getting a more monolithic system.